pleasure to welcome you all to our annual Career Talks event, and it's so great to see so many of you here online. My name is Garisha, and I'm a Year 12 student at BSJ. I'm part of Ilmu Kita, a passionate social enterprise committed to helping students determine their best fit career path and preparing them for life outside of high school. With that being said, allow me to introduce our esteemed guest, Dr. Rajesh Singh. Dr. Rajesh is a highly acclaimed orthopedic surgeon specializing in minimally invasive procedures. He holds qualifications in medical education, surgical anatomy, and musculoskeletal ultrasound, and has practiced and taught in a variety of countries. Let us give a warm welcome for Dr. Rajesh. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here. Could you please elaborate on the work that you do to start us off?
Okay, Garisha, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the kind invitation. I have a few different roles. So my first role is as an orthopedic surgeon. And in fact, I'm sitting in my clinic. You can look at my background. I've got my medical sharps bin and my yellow waste bin. And the other thing that I do is I'm also a professor at Monash University. So I teach the anatomy program at Monash University. I always wanted a hybrid career. So for me, being a doctor was one of the things I was interested in. I was also interested in a lot of different things. So I do orthopedic surgery. I do musculoskeletal ultrasound. I do medical education. I do teaching at the university. I do research and development. I supervise PhD students. So I do quite a lot of different things, and I do things based fundamentally on what I'm interested in.
That sounds like such a varied career. So what is a typical workday like for you, since you have such a variety of activities that you participate in?
Good question. No such thing as a typical workday. So let me go yesterday. What did I do? So yesterday was Monday. So yesterday I started operating at one hospital, and that was an open operation. And after that open operation, I went to a different hospital, and there I did image guided operations. So an operation means that you have to cut somebody open in order to achieve something. Image guided operations means that instead of cutting them open, you can use specialized imaging technologies to look inside and specialized instruments to do your operation under the skin. So instead of cutting people open, you can achieve the same result without having to cut people open. That was just in the morning session. So in the morning session, I operated at two different universities. Sorry, at two different hospitals. And then in the afternoon, I went to the university and I supervised my PhD student who is doing a computer science PhD on the same topic that I'm working on, which is image guided surgery. So that was yesterday. Today morning, I've been in clinic all morning. Started clinic early so that I could finish in time to be here for this. And basically patients come in, sit in the chair, say, this hurts, that hurts, I've got this problem, I've got that problem. I listen to them. I personally do a point of care ultrasound, so I'm not sure if you can see behind me. Yep, this thing over here, this is an ultrasound machine. So I do a lot of point of care orthopedic ultrasound. And then I say to them, well, look, here's your problem, and these are the things that you could potentially do. And after this, I'm going to go into my operating theater to give a specialized guided injection for a patient who has a unique problem. And that's just Monday, Tuesday. Now, Wednesday, what am I doing? So it's different every single day, which is, it's a mix of working with people, which is probably 99% of my job. And then sort of the academic or brain work that happens behind it, which is probably the 1% of my job.
That's such an impressive week, and it's so nice to see that you have such a jam-packed schedule. Can we go back to the start? So what was your educational background and journey to pursuing your career as a doctor, as a medical doctor?
Okay, so it's good to go back to my history. My parents are both doctors. And being in a typical Indian family, the expectation was to become a doctor. And to be honest, I wasn't particularly sure. I said to my parents, in all honesty, look, I'm probably interested. It's interesting. There's so many facets to it. There's so many things that you can do. But since there's a lot of pressure, I'm not sure. So I did my Sijil Tinggi Pelajaran Malaysia, which is our higher certificate of education in Malaysia. And I was fortunate enough to be able to get an opportunity to study in Australia at the University of New South Wales that had a combination Bachelor's of Science and medical program. It's a combined 6-year program. So I said to my father, look, I'm probably interested, but if I'm not, then I'm going to exit after third year. I'm going to find what else I'm really interested in. Or if I'm interested, then I'll carry on. So I did my medical school in Australia. Then I did, again, just out of interest, after my intern year, which is the year that you have to do after you graduate in order to get your full medical licensure. I spent 1 year doing basic lab research. So I worked in a lab. I got some funding from the Medical Health Council of Australia. We were looking at cancer cells in liver. So, I'm an orthopedic surgeon now, but I looked at cancer cells in the liver. And that was very interesting because, to me, being a doctor is being an applied scientist. So if you're really interested in people, you can become a social worker. If you're really interested in science, you can become, a researcher in a lab. But to me, medicine's an applied science. But the science is still very important. And I think that that's probably one of the messages that, I really want to get out there, that you really have to be a good scientist. If you want to be a good doctor, you have to be a good scientist. You have to really understand the sort of nuts and bolts of how things work before you can consider yourself, to be a good doctor. Um, so then so that was my in medical school was in Australia. My research year was in Australia. Then I bumped around for a little while. I decided, okay, great. I've done my research. Now what do I want to do? I didn't really know. So a friend of mine was working in New Zealand. He said, why don't you come work in New Zealand? And I said, sure, why not? Just jalan jalan. People think that this medical career has to be like this, super duper stressful, structured thing. But I think it's different for everybody. I was happy to just go with the flow and see what happens. And so I found myself in a small town in New Zealand, and I started my orthopedic surgical training there. So I thought, oh, this is fun. It's interesting. Then I came back to Malaysia to do my orthopedic specialist training. Then I went back to Australia to do my further surgical training in orthopedics. Then I came back to Malaysia and I taught at the University Kebangsaan, our national university. I was a lecturer there for a few years. Then I ventured out into private practice, and then I got my job as a professor at the private university. So I've just always only ever followed my interests. That looks interesting, I'll do it. This looks interesting, I'll do it. That's interesting, but heck, it's in the middle of nowhere. That's okay. So if you want to have a good career in anything, you fundamentally have to be interested in it. I think the calculation of what will I get from it is probably a little bit synthetic. It's not a very reasonable thing to do. People will sort of sit down and do the numbers and say, I want to make this amount of money by this year, and I want to have my house, my car, my condo, whatever else. It's okay if those things are important to you. It's okay to make a decision that way, but it's also important to make decisions for your career if you want a career on why am I doing it. And for me, the answer is clear. Because any of you kids listening here, I've got 30 of you. Any of you listening here who wants to do medicine because your parents tell you to, don't. Say to them, this strange guy from Malaysia said, don't. It's a bad idea. And I'm sure I'm going to get in trouble for this, but the reason why it's a bad idea to do it for your parents is because medicine is a very intense career. It's not something that you can just sort of shut off and say, well, okay, that's it. It's 5 o'clock. I'm going home. There's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders because you're looking after human beings. You're looking after people who are suffering. So it's not something that you can just say, well, it's 5 o'clock. I'm shutting the file. I'm going home. So the only reason to do medicine is because you find it fundamentally interesting. And you could argue that that's the same for any career. So I would turn it on its head and say that if you're not interested, don't pursue medicine. Only if you're interested, pursue medicine. And how do you know you're interested? Well, do attachments. Find people who are in clinical practice, join them. Join them in the clinics, join them in the laboratory, join them in the hospital, join them in the operating theater. Just be with a doctor going through the day and go, is this something that I think I could end up doing? Because you're very young when you make the decision. You're 17, 18. Before that, you're already sort of planning. I had completely no idea what I wanted to do when I was 17 or 18. I just thought, I should probably do this, because I had my own family reasons too. But I did think I was interested in it. So, I took my medical school years to decide, hey, is this something that I'm really interested in? And do I want to keep pursuing it? And I was always ready to give it up at any time. If I wasn't interested in it, I was going to go do something else. It just so happened that, one thing looked interesting, then the next thing looked interesting, then the next thing looked interesting. So I think the key message is if you're not interested in medicine, don't do it. If you're interested in medicine, by all means, do pursue it.
I think that's a key message that we've learned today. Follow your interests. So, on to the next question. What led you to choosing your specialty of orthopedics?
Very good question. My parents are both doctors, so it's not a very sophisticated answer. I just asked my mother. I said, "Ma, what do you think I should do?" I know it's hilarious, isn't it? And her analysis was, she said, "Look, you're very good with your hands." So I was very skilled. I did a lot of carpentry, craftsmanship. I was very handy with tools. I was repairing things. Any piece of electrical or mechanical equipment that was broken down, I would fix. And she said, "You're very good with your hands, but you're also pretty good with your brain. So why don't you do something that requires both hand skill and brain skill?" So, well, I looked around and that was surgery. Um, then it came to what type of surgery. Then it came to an issue of personality. The different surgical skills, different surgical sort of disciplines require different personality characteristics. And I'm a sort of pretty relaxed, laid back, kind of not too stressed, not too tense kind of person. So of all the surgical rotations that I did, the orthopedic guys seem to be having a lot of fun. Sort of they just seem to be having a lot of fun, and I thought, okay, that looks like fun, so I'll go do that. Um, it was a lot of hard work. The competition for specialist training is very, very intense. But that's the same for probably any field which is what's the word I'm looking for, which is seen to be a lucrative field. So I did orthopedics because it seemed like, my mother told me to be, it sounded like fun. But as it happens, orthopedics is one of those fields where doctors make a lot of money. So the competition is very intense. And I'm still having fun. So people who did it for the money aren't happy if they didn't make the money. I'm going, it's fun. And so that's a good reason to get up every morning and go, that's an interesting problem. I wonder how I'm going to solve that. So I would say that if you want to choose your specialty, it is depending, again, just follow your interests. If that's the area that you think you're going to spend the rest of your life looking at, then that's great. I did consider ear, nose, and throat surgery, but thought, yeah, spending my life looking at people's noses and into their ears, no, not my lifetime. But orthopedics, I thought, yeah, that's fun. I can look at hips, knees, shoulder, ankles, back, spines, feet. There's so many different things. And that's one of the things I like about my specialty, just the fact that it's so broad, and I can focus on different things at different times.
That's wonderful. How did COVID change your career? Because I'm sure it had a large impact on, your life as a doctor and even your personal life.
Yeah, I think COVID just made clear that if you're in it for the wrong reasons, you shouldn't be in it, because we had to look after patients who were potentially infectious and put ourselves and our families at risk while at the same time continuing to do our job. So, there are probably a few places where that would happen. Places I can think of, like if you work in a nuclear reactor and there is a problem with the nuclear reactor, then, you put your life online to serve the greater good. You don't just run away from the nuclear reactor. If you're, in firefighting or police and you find yourself in a situation of danger, then, you put your job before the danger. And in medicine, that hadn't happened before. Well, it had. It had in a way. The SARS epidemic, which preceded this COVID epidemic, I know doctors who died during SARS. So I know people who actually lost their lives in the line of duty. So I think what COVID has done is it's just made it clear, not just, SARS was largely an Asian phenomenon. So I think COVID has made it clear for the whole world that when you take on the mantle of caring for sick people, you're doing so at some peril to yourself. And that's something that, you have to be comfortable with. So that's probably personally. Professionally, it made the delivery of healthcare very difficult because people who were sick and needed care couldn't get to hospitals because of the lockdown. Resources were reallocated to looking after COVID when really there were a lot of other healthcare issues which needed those resources allocated to them. People didn't stop getting sick. The normal illnesses that would happen the day before COVID didn't stop the day after COVID. What COVID did was it just usurped all the resources from everything else and focused it on one disease. So, the politics, COVID really laid bare a lot of the sort of shortcomings and weaknesses in the healthcare system. It also reaffirmed one of my fundamental beliefs in medicine is the fact that it doesn't matter who you are. I see heads of state in my room. I see the security guard who works around my building in my room. They both sat in the same chair. So it doesn't matter whether you're a head of state. It doesn't matter whether you're the security guard. Every human body suffers the same illnesses. And I think COVID really brought that home, that it didn't matter what your socioeconomic status was, everybody in the world was subject to the same problem because we're all human.
That's a very powerful message. You mentioned some interesting technologies that you use in your clinic, and I'm sure that, as the world progresses and technology becomes ever more accessible and advanced, there will be changes in your field in the future. Could you give us some insight on that?
Sure. So I think the correct way to look at technology is it's just a tool. This smartphone that I have can do a lot of stuff, but I fundamentally use it to communicate with somebody else. And that's the same when the telephones were invented in 1930s, 1940s. People picked it up and spoke to somebody. We pretty much just do the same. It just allows us a bit more communication. And medical technologies are the same. So the development of X-rays, for example, Röntgen, 1902, 1903, something like that. You could look into the human body. Well, now you've got CT scan, MRI, X-ray, PET scan. We're still looking into the human body, and we're still looking into the human body for the same reason. Anton van Leeuwenhoek, when he first invented the microscope, he was looking at a cell. And we're still looking into cells. We're still looking into cells, but in different ways and for the same reason, which is basically to elucidate basic mechanisms of disease. Operations. I used to operate with a knife and make a big hole. Now I'm using specialized instruments and guidance technology, but I'm still trying to achieve the same thing. So in medicine, the idea with technologies is that it doesn't change what we do, which is we care for people, but it changes how we do things. And so this idea that that technology is going to revolutionize medicine is something that I've heard many times come and go. But if medicine's about the fundamental care of people who have illness, then the only revolution is going to be some technology that prevents illness, and that doesn't happen yet.
That's very interesting. You mentioned that COVID had a large impact on your career, and that's as expected. But were there any other challenges that you faced that maybe even led you to think, did I pick the right career? Was this for me?
Not for me, right? I had already reconciled, so I did because I had such a varied and interesting career. I did some really weird and wonderful stuff. So in Australia in the 1990s, Australia was taking in Kosovan refugees from the war in Kosovo, just like you have now between Russia and Ukraine. And so imagine plane loads of Ukrainians, being displaced to third countries until the war is over to go back. So I was actually on the tarmac in the airport waiting for people to get off the plane, to sort of offer some humanitarian aid before they were resettled. And that was pretty scary because we didn't know what was coming on the plane. We didn't know whether the plane was bombed. We didn't know whether people had malicious intent. Persons who were on the plane, what could have happened. So I always had a good sense of adventure in relation to medicine. So for me, when COVID came about, it was pretty much business as usual because I already sort of factored that into my decision. Because I did it, I did it because I wanted to do it. I did it because it was interesting, and I did it because it was fun. So it wasn't a huge impact. The impact was really the disarray in which I saw the healthcare system, and that was probably the biggest challenge, that the whole healthcare system is in disarray. And just as one individual, it's impossible to make that much of a difference for a healthcare system which is in that much of disarray.
Thank you for your answer. Um, what is something you wish you would have known before pursuing your career as a doctor?
Oh, good grief. I wish I had known the personal expense. I guess I kind of did because my parents were both doctors, but there's a difference between knowing and knowing. And in training years, the hours are really, really, really long. As in, like, I would be up at 5:30 in the morning and I would go to bed at, I don't know, maybe 11, 12 o'clock at night for 4 or 5 years, 7 days a week. I'd be lucky if I had one day off a week. Sometimes it'd be one day off a month. Um, because it's just difficult. The circumstances of training in medicine are difficult, have always been difficult, and will probably always be difficult because when you want to train, you want to have the most body of experience. And you can't have a body of experience with a 9 to 5 job, it doesn't exist. You have to get thrown into the deep end. And that takes a huge personal cost. And I think that you have to ask yourself, you know, am I willing to pay the cost? And sometimes it's a little bit hard to say before. It's only probably possible to say after having gone through it that, would I really want to do it again? Answer is I'm not sure. I've done it once. That was pretty good. Maybe I'll try something else. Um, but if the question is, did I know? I guess I did. Did I appreciate? No, I didn't appreciate. And I think that's the real challenge. The real challenge is there's a difference between knowing and appreciating it. I came from a background of doctors who were family, so I knew, but I didn't really appreciate. Um, but then again, one of my colleagues whose parents work in a wholesale market. So one of my colleagues, both her parents run a wholesale. So the fruit comes from the importer, and then they distribute it, and then sort of it gets sold on. And she said, in the wholesale industry, we get up at 5 in the morning. We work until the end of the day because fresh fruit, if you don't get it processed in a certain time, it spoils. So her view was that anything you want to do that's worthwhile in life requires sacrifices and requires hard work. So if you're fundamentally interested in doing those things, then those sacrifices and hard work are worthwhile.
So, how did you motivate yourself during those tough times? And what advice would you give to students who are thinking about applying to medicine, but maybe they're a bit afraid because of the really competitive application process, or they know about the cost that it will have on their lives?
That's a tough one. I'd say family support, family support, family support, family support, family support. Um, and I think and that's just an inescapable fact that you are going to work in service of other humans. If you don't have people to support you in the service of other humans, you're going to fall apart. So it's useful to have a partner, useful to have a family who understands that it's not just a job, it's a calling, and the fact that the calling requires sacrifice. So if your partner ends up not valuing what you do and going, it's just an inconvenience, then you're either with the wrong person or doing the wrong thing. If your family says, why are you doing that? Why can't you do something easier? Again, clearly not with the wrong family. Your family is your family, but you may have to look at some way of getting support for what is it that you need to be able to do.
Thank you for that valuable advice. What are the opportunities for advancement in this occupation? Because the hiring process itself is long, and then to specialize again, it can take up to 10 years. So,
Okay, so basically, I think the career opportunities are limitless. It just depends on how adventurous you are and what you want to do. So for myself, I've been an employee of a government hospital. I've been an employee of a private hospital. I've been an employee of a university. I run my own business now, and I employ people. And I've become a business owner by running my own business. So I think where you want to go depends on what you want to do. The idea that there's only one career path is false. If you're willing, it's this idea of a queue is if you take that road. And so this is what people complain about. They complain that the traffic jams in the middle of Jakarta are bad, well, sure, everybody wants to live in the middle of Jakarta. You try living 4 hours outside of Jakarta, 5 hours outside of Jakarta, there's no traffic. And it's the same in medicine. Everybody wants that prime specialty that pays you the most, that gets you the most prestige, that gets you the most money, that's 9 to 5, that doesn't require any severe on-call commitment. Well, if you want that, then you join the queue. If you want to do something that you can satisfy your interests, you can make a decent living off, and you can serve a community, then there's plenty of opportunities for that.
You have many interests outside of your own private clinic, like medical education and many other sectors. So, how do you balance your time? And also, how did you discover that you wanted to do that many things?
Okay, I balance my time very badly because I've got somebody waiting who I should have treated before I came on to this. So clearly, I don't balance my time very well. Um, I try my best. I try to make commitments. Scheduling certainly helps. Having a good support staff certainly helps. Being able to be quick at what you do certainly helps. How did I find out I had many interests? I just spent time when something was interesting, I didn't stop. Right? So when I tried something new and I found it was interesting, I didn't stop doing it saying, okay, time's up, have to stop now. I just kept doing it and then found, oh, okay, time's running out. Now I have to balance this to that. And then when something else became interesting, I started to pursue that. And then I said, oh, okay, well, I'm kind of really don't want to spend my time here. And then I moved on from there. So it is like a try and see, and don't say, well, I'm supposed to try this for 30 minutes. I tried it for 30 minutes. Time's up. Time to move on. It's like try it and say, oh, I tried it. I liked it. I'm going to keep pursuing it until I don't like it or it's not interesting anymore. And so that's probably the way you would look at it.
And what would your role as a medical educator be? And how does it feel to be kind of up in front of so many young aspiring students looking to come into a position that you are today?
I like it because it reminds me of the same questions I had when I was there. So, I teach at Monash University in Malaysia. The syllabus that they use is the same syllabus that I had in medical school in 2002. Now it's 2022, so in 20 years the syllabus hasn't changed. So I love being able to say this is right, this is wrong, this is rubbish. This is something that you'll find in the real life doesn't apply. So I like it. I like it that I have the ability to interact with fresh minds, people who are always asking questions naively and asking questions because they're not jaded or they haven't bought the BS yet. They're just going, well, you say this is ABC. I look at it and I go, it's sort of so A and B, yes, sort of it's somewhere between B and C. So what about all the spaces between A and B? And that discovery process is fun, because when we teach you guys, we just teach you, like we teach you the alphabet, we teach you A, B, C, D, E. We don't teach you how to make whole words, whole sentences. We don't teach you how to write essays. We don't teach you how to write stories. Those things you discover by yourself. And medical education is much the same. We only teach you the ABCs in medical school. Then, learning to make sentences, learning the grammar, all of that is stuff that you do as you go along. And how interesting a story of your life you have didn't depend on your medical school. Because the medical school, unless you fail to learn the ABCs in medical school, which some people do. Some people fail to learn ABCs in medical school. But then when you get out, that's when the interesting part really starts.
If a procedure does not go to plan, how do you pick yourself up from that?
The same way it is when you're young. It doesn't matter. You wanted to get the A, you didn't get the A. Ouch. You liked that boy, the boy didn't like you. Ouch. You liked that girl, the girl said, talk to my hand. Ouch. It's the same feeling. The disappointment's exactly the same. There's nothing special about it. What's different about it is that as you're older, you actually have to say to yourself, now I have to do this. You can't spend 3 days in bed crying and eating ice cream. Sort of you've got that little while that you've got to pick yourself up and carry on. The medical field is a large field, a lot of career choices. What do you suggest if I have a change in career plans or remain in the same field? Did you already have a specific goal when you first attended university? I just went with the flow easily. There are lots of alternative careers in medicine now. sort of with when I say medicine, I mean you have a body of knowledge. That body of knowledge is unique to the field of study that you have. It doesn't mean that you apply that body of knowledge for the care of sick human beings. You can apply that body of knowledge, in an IT startup, working for a pharmaceutical company. You can apply the body of knowledge in lots of different places. So the body of knowledge is a valuable body of knowledge. It'll take you 5, 6 years of really hard work to master that body of knowledge. So that body of knowledge is valuable, and you can use it in different ways.
What kind of soft and hard skills do you think that aspiring medics should have?
Okay, hard skills are basically facts and knowledge. You need to have a ton of information available at your fingertip, and there's just no way around it. You can't say, "Oh, I feel that your pain may be coming from your heart. You're having a heart attack, you're not having a heart attack. What's the criteria?" Um, the soft skills are really the soft skills. All you guys already have. It's just being human, right? It's knowing, like, you turn up to school, not that you're in school now, you're all on Zoom, but when you turn up to school and you look at somebody and they look sad, they look like they're suffering, looks like there's something wrong with them, you can already see it. You talk to someone and you go, something's not right. So all those emotional tools you already have. So the soft skills, I think, young people already have, because they're the same skills that you need to negotiate the world as you grow up. It's just that as a profession, we would systematize it and allow you to decide which tool you want to use it, how much you want to use it, and when you want to use it.
You've mentioned your interest in musculoskeletal ultrasound and minimally invasive procedures. For example, you mentioned at the start you use imaging techniques rather than, the typical scalpel open procedures. So could you just explain a little bit more in detail about that?
Okay, so that really again came about from interest. So in hospital, my job was to organize investigations and tests. I would organize for a patient to have an ultrasound scan, and then my boss would look at the ultrasound scan and make an opinion, and then we'd go into the operating theater. And oftentimes, what I found that when we did the operation and what we saw was different to what the scan results said. So I went, okay, well, clearly there's a disconnect of information here. And then I asked myself, well, why is that? Then, I'd go down to the X-ray department and, say, hey, look, guys, this is what I'm seeing, right? This is what you tell me, but this is what I see in the in the operation. So what's going on? So that way, I worked out that the technology was very good, but the application of the technology was not very well done, because there were two. The person who made the picture never saw what was inside, and the person who saw what was inside never made the picture. So, you can clearly see that there's an issue there. So I said, well, what about if the guy who sees what's inside makes the picture? So that's when I started to sort of pick up musculoskeletal ultrasound, and I went, oh, this is pretty cool. I can see lots of stuff inside before I cut it open. So that gave me a lot of information to plan my surgeries. Then it sort of turned on its head when I said, well, since I can see all the stuff on the inside, what if I can operate on it without having to cut you open? Kind of logical, right? So then I said, okay, so since I'm a surgeon, I know tools and I know equipments. So I started to develop tools and equipments which allowed me to reach the inside of people without having to cut them open, because I can already see. So since I can already see, then I don't have to cut them open. And that's basically where the technique evolved. So it evolved because I was interested. I said, well, this doesn't make sense. How do I join the dots? Then when I joined those dots, I went, okay, well, there's this dot over there. What happens if I sort of pull these two dots together? And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes we go, wow, that was a bad idea. That was a complete waste of time and effort. But at other times, you make sort of real advances in being able to improve care for people.
Wow. So failure is part of the progress.
Failure is part of progress, yes. Lots of failure, some progress.
What has been a memorable experience, for example, with a patient or when you were working overseas or even at home that really made your day or made you proud of being able to service people who are suffering?
Okay, my first most profound experience was helping somebody die. So I was a young doctor. I was in a hospital, and a lady had come in who'd been in many times before, and she was very unwell, and she knew that she was probably going to die, and she had no family at all. So I said to her, what do you want me to do? She said, just sit here with me and hold my hand until I die. Yeah, it's not not something people ask of you every day. Um, and that was really profound. That was one of the points at which I said there is no other. Well, maybe minister or clergy. Maybe if you're in sort of the religious fields, you may be doing that. Um, but the most recent one was when I fixed my father's elder brother's knee pain. And so my uncle calls my dad up and says, "Hey, Rajesh, he's a good boy. Can do some useful stuff." That's pretty cool. Those, for you young people, those approbations come easily. As you get older, those approbations become more and more rare.
You've worked and taught in many countries, and what was your experience of like jumping between so many different countries, and what have you learned from that?
We're all human. We all suffer the same. We all bleed the same. We're all pink inside. All our blood's red. There's no difference. The question is just what sort of society are you comfortable living in? And can you relate to people in that society um, as a human being? That's all.
And would you say that the training progress, because you did your training in Australia, am I correct?
Yes.
The training process in Australia and Malaysia, does it have many differences?
The training in each country is optimized for function in that country. So, say for example, in Australia, I never saw tuberculosis of the spine. In Malaysia, I saw tons of tuberculosis of the spine. When I was working in Malaysia, we had a fellow who came from the UK to work with us in Malaysia to do replantation surgery. So we have tons of amputations in Malaysia. People get their bits chopped off all the time. Whereas in the UK, nobody gets their bits chopped off anymore. So she came to Malaysia to learn the specific skill of putting people's chopped off bits back together. So basically, a training program is always optimized to the local situations and needs. So to say that one is significantly better than the other in terms of medicine is actually not entirely correct because there are so many local nuances. Um, I'm sure that an American trained orthopedic surgeon coming to Malaysia would really struggle to practice, even if he came from Mayo or Harvard or Stanford, just because the nature of practice in medicine in Malaysia is different. So he may say, or he or she may say, well, this is the way we do it over there. Well, that's great, go over there and do it. But our patient requirements are different. Our social needs are different. Our social constructs different. So you need to be sensitive to all those things in terms of, because you're fundamentally caring for another human being. You're looking after somebody else. So you need to understand those values.
What advice would you give to students right now? Like, what could they be doing in preparation for their years in training?
Number one, if mommy and daddy tell you, say no, get lost, I'm going to do something else. Number two, try and get as much exposure as you can. Like, if you don't have family and friends or in medicine, attach to different people, talk to different people, try and be with as many different people as you can in as many different circumstances as you can. So it's not just, the major rumah sakit in the middle of Jakarta. It is the district clinics. It is the general practitioners. It is the nurses. It is, anybody in healthcare that you can get access to. Go down to the X-ray department, see what happens when they shoot X-rays. Go to the reception in your hospital, see how patients register for reception. Try and get as much exposure as you can to the reality of it before you jump into it.
How do you manage your passions? Because I'm sure you have passions outside of medicine and research and medical education. So how do you make time for that?
Actually, I don't. I have an exceptionally uninteresting and boring life. My exceptionally uninteresting and boring life basically revolves around my work and my family.
Is that satisfactory for you?
Yeah, it is. So for me, so say for example, my business partners just walked in, given me a form to sign, which I'll sign because I have absolutely no knowledge or ability as to what this is. So the other thing is to find good people who you want to work with. So I'm sure that is a very important form. I have a philosophy: is it my department or not my department? If it's not my department, I have people I trust, and those people do it. But me personally, yeah, look, I'm a super geek. I eat, sleep, drink, think. science. And so, when we're on, kids are riding the roller coasters, I'm reading a book going, yeah, interesting. Is medical school as hard as they say it is? Yes, it is as hard as they say it. It is that hard. And it is that hard because there is that much information, really that much information that you have to master on the go, right? Which is different to other areas because you don't need that information spot. The difference in medicine is you need to be able to master a body of knowledge at a minimum before you can function. So it's like learning to juggle. You need to be able to juggle a minimum of 3 balls. Once you can juggle 3 balls, you can add 4, 5. But if you can't even start to juggle, then that's where your problem is. So yes, med school is very difficult. There's no question about it. It doesn't mean you can't have fun, but my experience was in third year, I had semester 1, I had 10 exams, all of which were sudden death, meaning that if you fail the exam, you fail the year. And I was in the study hall, and there's an art student who was going, oh my God, this is so hard. And I said, oh, what's wrong? And he goes, I have one 30 question multiple choice exam. Oh my God, it's so hard. I felt like it's slap. But yeah, it's not comparable. It is really, really tough. It's a long process. Have you ever wanted to quit? Yeah, absolutely. At the end of my 6 years of medicine, I said, man, this is really too much. I'm not sure I want to keep doing it. So there's a management consultant company called Boston Consulting. It was on my university campus, and they came to interview. And I went and interviewed, and they gave me a whole bunch of psychometric assessments, and apparently I did really well, and they made me a job offer. So I went for the orientation, and I used to ride a motorcycle in those days, so leather jacket, red helmet, jeans, boots. And I turned up to this sort of corporate event where absolutely every single person was wearing a nice suit, carrying a black briefcase, and had a nice haircut. And I said, yeah, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be you. I want to be me. So I said, hey guys, thanks for the offer. That's really great. And they got really upset because apparently it's a very prestigious company and nobody's ever turned down an offer. Yeah, okay, not interesting. Thank you very much. And so, yes, I did think once, but then I looked at the other side and thought, no, this side's better. After studying and working in Australia and New Zealand, what made you decide to come back to Malaysia and work? Basically, my parents. So my parents are both doctors. And my mum said to me once, my only doctor son is very far away. What are you going to say to that? There's a huge difference in the work environment. There's an absolutely massive difference in the work environment. I think I would probably have published twice as much literature if I'd continued working in, so I'm in private practice. I still do research. I still do teaching. I still do education, all the things that I did while I was at the university sector. My academic output would probably, I would probably be one of the top people in the world in musculoskeletal ultrasound if I was still in Australia, right? But would I be of any service to the people whom I know or love? So that being of service to my community was important to me, more important to me than money, power, or prestige.
And on that amazing note, we will have to end the session here. Dr. Rajesh, thank you so much for taking out time of your day to be with us and provide such valuable insights, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Good stuff. Good luck, kids.